Tonight from Normandy, a special edition of World News Tonight, honoring our heroes, the World War II veterans who stormed the beaches of Normandy 80 years ago today. Tonight, my exclusive interview with President Biden. What the president said here today about the bravery of thousands of American sons who stormed the beaches here 80 years ago, and the fight for freedom and democracy even today. Our moment with the president and first lady at the Normandy American Cemetery. And the president tonight on the other news. Ukraine, the U.S. authorizing the use of American weapons to strike inside Russia. The president reacting tonight to Vladimir Putin's new warning. Back home, immigration closing the U.S.-Mexico border. The president's executive action. I asked the president why he didn't do this sooner. The president on Donald Trump's guilty verdict. How big of a role does he think it should play in the election? And we ask about his own son, Hunter Biden, and his trial. We ask, would the president pardon his son? Also here in Normandy tonight, the American veterans returning. We told them we would meet them at Utah Beach, where we witnessed today the crowd of strangers growing, then the applause for the American heroes, the gratitude here for their sacrifice. And the remarkable moment here between President Zelensky and an American veteran. What that veteran said to President Zelensky and what Ukraine's leader said back. The other news back in the U.S. tonight, severe storms up and down the East Coast. Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City. And more than 22 reported tornadoes, multiple states, and they've turned deadly tonight. The major headline in the Israel-Hamas war tonight, UN officials now saying dozens are dead after an Israeli airstrike hit a school in central Gaza. What we're learning.
From ABC News, this is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Normandy, France.
Good evening tonight from Normandy, where we witnessed something truly historic today. World War II veterans returning 80 years to the day after they stormed the beaches of Normandy and changed the course of history here. Tonight, my exclusive interview with President Biden, who honored these heroes today, and the poignant moment at the Normandy American Cemetery here with President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, what we noticed on one of the crosses, and the remarkable exchange here between President Zelensky today and a World War II veteran who told Zelensky, "You are a savior of the people." Zelensky said, "No, you saved Europe." But we begin tonight with our exclusive interview with President Biden. Ukraine, Russia, the president closing the U.S.-Mexico border. I asked him, why not sooner? The president on Donald Trump's guilty verdict and on his own son, Hunter Biden's trial. I asked, would he pardon his son? But we started with the significance of this day, our interview with Omaha Beach right behind us. It's not lost on us where we are today, what these brave young American sons did 80 years ago. And we know what we're witnessing in the world right now, the wars, the deep divisions at home. What do you think these American heroes can teach us right now about meeting this moment?
Stand up, tell the truth, serve your country. You know, imagine what they had to come through. I was here 30 years ago, came in on a landing craft. You could see from out there what they saw here. The idea that they got off those boats, they got off those landing crafts, many of them died. It's just astounding. It's astounding. What it says to me is how critical alliances are, for our security.
You talk about those alliances. I wanted to ask you about Ukraine. I know for years you resisted the idea of American weapons being used for any sort of direct strike inside Russia. But we did witness this shift in recent days, authorizing American weapons for limited direct strikes. Are American weapons being used right now inside Russia?
They're authorized to be used in proximity to the border. We're not authorizing strikes 200 miles into Russia. We're not authorizing strikes on Moscow, on the Kremlin.
Does this at all concern you, though, that it could not only escalate the war between Ukraine and Russia, but draw the U.S., the West into this in a much larger way?
It theoretically could, but it's not likely. Look, the idea that Russia is this juggernaut that is absent nuclear weapons, this conventional juggernaut. You know how many troops they've lost so far? 350,000 dead or wounded without a single American troop being engaged by supplying the Ukrainians with the weapons they need.
Let me ask you about what Vladimir Putin said last night about this authorization of American weapons inside Russia. He said the supply of high-precision weapons to Ukraine for strikes on Russian territory is direct participation in this war, and again talked about Russia's nuclear capabilities. Does that concern you?
I've known him for over 40 years. He's concerned me for 40 years. He's not a decent man, he's a dictator, and he's struggling to make sure he holds this country together. while still keeping this assault going. We're not talking about giving them weapons to strike Moscow, to strike the Kremlin, to strike just across the border where they're receiving significant fire from conventional weapons used by the Russians to go into Ukraine to kill Ukrainians.
I want to turn to Israel. It was 1 week ago you stood before the American people, before the world, with this ceasefire proposal. You urged Hamas to accept it. The first phase of this is a temporary ceasefire to get hostages out, including Americans. But it hasn't happened yet. And I'm curious, is Benjamin Netanyahu fully on board with what you proposed before the world?
He's publicly said he is. Our European friends are in on it. We have to get a ceasefire.
But on this relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, you have said repeatedly that Israel has every right to defend itself, that America stands with Israel. But you also have at times said the response has been over the top, were your words. You warned about Rafah. We've seen what's happened inside Rafah. You're aware the weapons experts looked at the bomb that was used, some of the weapons that were used that killed civilians at that camp, and determined some of those weapons were American-made. Is Benjamin Netanyahu listening to you?
I think he's listening to me. They were going to go into Rafah full bore, invade all of Rafah, go into the city, take it out, move with full force. They haven't done that. And what they've done is they've agreed to a significant agreement that if in fact Hamas accepts it, and look, it's being backed by Egypt, being backed by the Saudis, being backed by almost the whole Arab world. We'll see. This is a very difficult time.
Let me ask you about one of the major issues back home, immigration, and your executive action in recent days on the U.S.-Mexico border. As we sit here today, that border has been shut down between legal ports of entry. In January, you were asked if there was anything else you could do about the border, and you said, "I've done all I can do." What changed here, and why did you do this back then?
Because we had a deal. We had a compromise that was organized and run by a very conservative senator from the state of Oklahoma, a Republican, and Democrats, and they sat for 4 weeks. They came up with a proposal that would have gone much further, would have been the most significant change in border security in our history. But guess what? According to Republicans, even the senator from the conservative senator from Oklahoma today said, no, guess what? Trump didn't want it. So we got on the phone and told people don't support it. And that's what I was hoping we'd get done, rather than me step in to take action that isn't as far as the action that could have been taken had we gotten this deal.
Do you wish you had done it sooner?
No, because I would have been blamed for blowing up the agreement that was going forward, which was a better agreement than my limited ability to do so.
You bring up your opponent, Donald Trump. He has said of your executive action, he's pretending to finally do something about the border, but it's all about show. He says we have a debate coming up. Biden's executive order is weak and pathetic.
Is he describing himself? Weak and pathetic? Come on. Look, everybody knows what's happened. We had a deal. It was much broader than this, much better, much more accepted across the board. And he got on the phone and told the Republicans, don't support it. It will hurt me, it will help Biden.
You did address Donald Trump and the guilty verdict on 34 felony counts before the American people. You told Americans to respect the jury and the outcome of this case. You were at a campaign fundraiser and you told the room a convicted felon is now seeking the office of the presidency. You called it disturbing. What do you think the American people should make of this? How important do you think this conviction should be in this race for president?
That's for the public to decide, but one thing for certain is stop undermining the rule of law. Stop undermining the institutions. That's what this whole effort is. All the MAGA Republicans are coming out saying this was a fix, this was a jury that this was a judge that set up to get Trump. There's no evidence of any of that, none. He's trying to undermine it. Look, he got a fair trial. The jury spoke like they speak in all cases, and it should be respected.
As we sit here in Normandy, your son Hunter is on trial, and I know that you cannot speak about an ongoing federal prosecution. But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
You have. Let me ask you, as we sit here today, you're preparing to speak to the world about the fight for democracy, both abroad and at home. We are 3 weeks from this debate. What do you think you need to accomplish on that debate stage?
Say what I think. Let him say what he thinks. The things he said are off the wall. see, I want to be a dictator on day one. I want to move in a direction where he talks about, suspending the Constitution. All I have to do is hear what he says, remind people what he says and what I believe, what he believes. He's about him. I'm about the country.
Are you ready for this debate?
Yes.
But on this day, the President and the First Lady are honoring the bravery here in Normandy.
It's hard to stand here without recognizing the bravery of all of these young men 80 years ago this morning.
The sacrifice they made to protect our freedoms, the things they fought for, I think what an obligation we have to preserve what they fought for.
And the First Lady thinking of her own father, who enlisted after D-Day.
You think about Donald Jacobs?
I do.
I mean,
it's hard not to. And
your father.
He signed up. He was actually too young. My grandmom had to sign for him to sign up. And as a child, I mean, I have 4 sisters, and he told us about it every day. I mean, we knew he was, he so honored his service to our country.
I couldn't help but to notice on this cross here, a comrade in arms known but to God.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the unknowns.
Think of how many people never found out what happened to their child, their husband.
The President and the First Lady say they are determined to remember the sacrifice.